Hello and welcome to Outlook from the BBC World Service. I'm Matthew Bannister. Now, the Algerian novelist and poet Ahlem Mosteghanemi is the best-selling female author in the Arab world. She has 3 million followers on Facebook and was ranked in the top 10 most influential women in the Middle East by Forbes magazine in 2006. She now lives in Beirut. Her million-selling book, The Bridges of Constantine, has just been published in English. It's the first novel she ever wrote, over 20 years ago, and tells the story of Khaled, a former revolutionary in the Algerian War of Liberation who lives in exile in Paris, and his adoration of a young Algerian writer, Hayat, who becomes a symbol of everything he longs for in his lost homeland.
There are cities like women. Their names defeat you in advance. They seduce and bewilder you, fill you up and drain you. Their remembrance strips you of all your plans. Your whole project becomes love. There are cities that weren't created to be visited and explored alone, for you to sleep and wake up in, and then to have breakfast alone. Cities as beautiful as memory, as close as a tear, as painful as loss. Cities so like you.
Well, Ahlem Mosteghanemi spoke to the BBC's Anna McNamee, and Anna asked how her publisher reacted when she first gave him The Bridges of Constantine.
عندما قدمت له المخطوط وأتذكر أنه جبته في كيس متاع.
When I handed over my draft, I remember bringing it in a plastic bag because there were so many pages. I'd brought the manuscript over from France, where I'd spent 4 years writing it without even knowing if it was a novel or not. I even used to read it to my maid because she understood Arabic. She'd come and help me for a few hours each day, and as soon as we'd finished the housework, we'd sit and read sections from the novel, and I'd ask her, "What do you think? Any good?" I was embarrassed to give it to my husband or to any famous writers. When I wrote the book, I had 3 young children, so when they went to sleep, I'd get into bed and write. I got so used to writing in bed that I no longer know how to write at a desk. After I gave it to the editor, I just got up and left. I didn't even call him because I was so scared. And then he called me and said, "This is a bomb. It's a bomb."
Your father, Mohammed Sharif, was a militant political activist during the War of Independence, like Khalid. Presumably you drew on his experiences, his stories, or his relationship to Algeria when you were writing the novel.
أبي موجود في الكتاب حتى الأسماء الأحداث لأنه أنا كنت.
My father is present in the book. When I lived in Paris, he would write me letters about what was going on back home, and everything he said to me in those letters appears in the book. But I also think that a writer writes from the unconscious. So I did write a lot about my father, maybe, without realizing it. It was only later, when I'd finished the book, I realized that although he didn't lose his arm like the narrator, he did have a nervous breakdown because of what happened in Algeria. My father spent several years in the hospital as a result of the coup. He saw his comrades in prison and how the revolution has ended. So maybe in my subconscious, when I created the character of Khaled, who was destroyed by what happened in Algeria, I was thinking of my father, who was also destroyed by the country, and of what Algeria did with the men of the revolution. It tortured their minds.
What you say is very intriguing, because the legacy of the independence, it sounds like it was a very exciting time. Lots of things were new, but at the same time it was also obviously very difficult, very dangerous. And I know that your father, as a member of government, was targeted in a coup and ended up in hospital. And as the eldest daughter, you took responsibility for financially supporting your family. How acceptable was that?
كان يعني ربما الفترة اللي ألمتني واللي تركت بصماتها على حياتي هي.
Perhaps the period of my life that left the deepest imprint on me was when I was about 17 years old and preparing for my exams at secondary school. I used to present a daily show on the Algerian national radio. It was an hour long, so it took a lot of work. I visited my father in the hospital and promised him, "Dad, I'll look after my brothers and sisters." My father cried and said, "I want you to study. I didn't get involved in the revolution for you to end up working." I began to rebel against Algerian society because I felt it was full of oppression. And those feelings increased when I was expelled from the Union of Algerian Writers. Even when I applied for my doctorate at university, I was rejected because my ideas were considered inappropriate for the university.
You published the first book of Arabic poetry written by a woman. I mean, this was a great thing. What was the problem? Why were you not accepted? Why were you not able to participate more widely?
I wasn't welcome because I had written about love. I was 17 years old at that time, and I had also written some political, confrontational poems. And I wrote in Arabic, which is the language of the sacred. When I gave my first poetry recital in Algeria, my father came out of hospital. I was very nervous about him hearing the poems I'd written, but in the end, when they criticized me, it was him who stood up and said, "That is my daughter, and she writes as she wishes. She is free." They were also shocked that a father would defend his daughter on such an issue. I left the room so strong. I was protected by my father. That's how I faced the people.
This book has been hugely popular. I think we've got at least 35 official editions in Arabic. And you've become a real figurehead for many women. What is it that they say to you, and what are they looking for from you?
سألتني إنه يمكن تأثيري على المجتمع العربي وماذا تنتظر مني.
You want to know my impact on Arab society and what women expect from me? First off, it isn't easy for an Arab woman to be successful. She has to do twice what men do because she will be judged twice as hard. She can't make any mistakes. When you first start having a big impact on the reader, of course you're pleased because of the, in inverted commas, glory you've received. But then the responsibility increases and it becomes scary, especially now in the age of the internet. My Facebook page has now reached 3.5 million readers and grows by 15,000 a day. So I'm responsible for every word I write. I can no longer write what I wrote in the 70s and 80s. If I did, it might increase my fame, but it would restrict my freedom, because the Arab reader has taken on the role of the critic. I often say, when a text written by a woman is published, it passes through 5 types of criticism. Self-criticism, criticism from one's husband, official criticism from the state, and the publisher's criticism. But the most dangerous criticism is that of the reader, because in the Arab world, you're judged by the reader. Yesterday, I had a book signing in Beirut, and I signed minimum 1,000 to 1,200 copies. It wasn't just women who turned up. There was even a boy. And he came to get his book signed, and he started crying. "I was going to commit suicide. You saved me from suicide," he told me. The real question is how to say everything and yet have one's books accepted into every household. You have to write books that girls can take into their homes without their dads getting angry. And in fact, often dads come in to buy my books for their daughters. I write in an Arab world where, for example, in Jordan, I know that around 30 women a year are killed in honor crimes. So you really can't go writing a book which is going to encourage women to cheat on their husbands and to go live their lives as they please, because you bear the responsibility for what happens to them. And that's why in the majority of my books there is no sex, because the reader will understand it not just as a book, but as a description of life. What both pleases me and makes me sad is that I've managed to get all my ideas across. I've never compromised on an idea. But I have to be careful. It's all about being clever, how you communicate with people.
Ahlem Mosteghanemi.